Hi guys, this is our mammal physiology video. By the end of it, you should be able to explain the structure, function, and adaptive advantage of these different systems: integumentary, skeletal, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, and nervous system in mammals. So the integumentary system, the epidermis, so that's like the outer layer of the skin, right? It's lightweight and waterproof, which helps mammals adapt to a variety of different environments. Some mammals have what's called epidermal scales, and those are like what's on the tails of beaver and rats. And then some, well, the only example of dermal plates where the epidermis is really hardened into almost like armor is the armadillo. So the epidermis gives rise to a number of different structures in the integument: hair, glands, nails, scales, hooves, baleen, that's what whales filter their food with, and horns. So hair in the horns is partially epidermis and partially bone. Hair arose from specialized mechanoreceptors and early synapsids, so we can see when we look back in earlier synapsids they didn't have hair, but they had these mechanoreceptors. And there's different types of hair. There's guard hairs. So when you look at a little cross section kind of mammal hair, the guard hairs are the coarse outer hair. It's longer, so they go the whole way, but they're the ones that are longer so that you see them on the outside of the fur, right? And they're for protection. It's coarse. And then underneath it's finer and shorter, and it's really soft, and that's more for insulation. So the hair is non-living, and it's replaced in mammals. Molting is one of the ways that it's replaced. So some mammals will just kind of continuously replace their hair, their fur, but many of them have a molting time when it pretty much all falls out and all gets replaced at once. And many mammals will molt annually in the fall. Some will molt twice a year. Deer will molt twice a year, so they'll put on a winter coat and then they'll lose it in the spring. And then there's a number of mammals that have color adaptations for their changing environment, things like snowshoe hares, where they turn white in the winter to blend with the snow cover, and then this is kind of in the molt, and then when the weather warms up again, the snow goes away, they're back to brown. And so that's also, again, twice a year. So the photoperiod, the amount of sunlight in a day, combined with melatonin production, is what kind of initiates that molt. And right here at NC State now, Dr. Scott Mills is doing research on snowshoe hares and their adaptations to climate change in relation to that molt. So if snow cover goes away sooner like at the end of winter and the beginning of spring, but the hairs are still white, so then you would have a white hair on a brown landscape, and that could make them more susceptible to predators. So he's looking at a lot of different questions about that. So horns and antlers are found in some mammals, and they're generally used for in reproduction and defense, and maybe even in offense. So the difference between horns and antlers is that horns are permanent and they're bony, whereas antlers are shed and they're not made of bone. So true horns are found in the bovine family, things like cattle, antelope, sheep, and goats. So you see here the bighorn sheep and pronghorn antelope. And they're usually not branched. The pronghorn does have a little bit of branching, but in general they're not branched. They have a permanent bony dermal core and then an epidermal sheath. So what you see here on the bighorn sheep, that's the epidermal sheath, and if you had the skull of this, you could take the sheath right off, and underneath there is bone. And they grow from the base, and there's actually annual growth rings on horns. So antlers are branched. they're solid, dead dermal bone. So, meaning that it comes from the epidermis, and you'll find these in the family Cervidae. And these are secondary sex characteristics. So in general, only males have antlers. One exception is caribou. So both male and female caribou have antlers, but the males are way bigger. And testosterone is the hormone that's generally responsible for antler growth. And photoperiod, again, the length of the day, signals when they're replaced, so when they shed their antlers and when they start growing new ones. And in general, they'll start growing them in the spring, and they'll be full grown at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, and then they shed them midwinter. So at the end of the winter, beginning of spring, that's when people go out trying to look for shed antlers. The velvet that you'll see on antlers, like in the spring and summer, is skin that covers the antlers, and it has blood vessels flowing through it, and they're feeding the growing antlers, so helping it grow. And at full growth, that velvet then rubs off. Mammals have some glands that make them distinct as part of their integument. So there's mammary glands, which are only found in mammals, and they're modified sweat glands that produce milk for their young. The hormone prolactin that's produced in the brain by the pituitary gland is responsible for milk production. And in general, the number of teats are equal to the maximum litter size or twice the average litter size. The sebaceous glands, another type of glands found in mammals, are oil glands, and those they create sebum, which lubricates the hairs. So you see here that the sebaceous gland is kind of connected to that where the hair follicle is. And that can actually be antibacterial, so it can be something that kind of helps protect against infection and things like that. Scent glands are numerous in mammals, and they can be widely distributed around the body. They can be used for different things like marking territory, attracting mates, defense mechanisms. So on the skunk, probably the best known scent gland in mammals. This is a great little diagram here, and the scent glands in skunks obviously is located near the anus, and that's more for defense. And if the scent that's released elicits a specific response from the same species, then it's considered a pheromone. That scent that's released is considered a pheromone. So the skeletal system of mammals, some of the things that are kind of unique about it, mammals are synapsids, remember? And so that means that there's a single pair of temporal fenestrae, so that's the holes back here. And you will see a zygomatic arch that kind of goes around the eye hole there, around the orbit. And if you could look in the ear and look at the bones in the ear, the bones are more complex in the ear than they are in other vertebrates, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The vertebrae of mammals is separated into different segments. So there's the cervical vertebrae, you think of that as the neck. The thoracic is where the ribs are attached. Then there's the lumbar vertebrae, that's kind of like the lower back. The sacrum is those fused vertebrae, so it's 5 fused vertebrae, and it's where the pelvis attaches, and so it allows for the locomotion that most mammals need. And then the caudal vertebrae are the tail vertebrae, and in some species like apes and humans, those caudal vertebrae are fused to form the tailbone, and you can see that here. So there's 3 basic different types of locomotion in mammals: plantigrade, digitigrade, and unguligrade. Plantigrade is mammals that walk flat on their feet. So insectivores, monkeys, apes, humans, bears, when we walk on our feet, we're walking on the whole entire surface of our foot, right? That's supposed to say foot, not food. And usually in plantigrade mammals, there's pentadactyl hands and feet, so 5 fingers or toes. Whereas digitigrade mammals are walking up on their toes. So like if we were to walk on our tippy toes, it's kind of like that. And they bear the weight on the ends of their metacarpals and metatarsals. Their wrists and ankles are elevated, and so this is kind of a good, you can see they're kind of just walking on their toes there, right? And the thumb, it depends on the species. It might be reduced. If it's reduced, it might be back up here, or it might be completely lost. And this allows things like carnivores to move faster than plantigrade animals. So rabbits, rodents, and carnivores exhibit the digitigrade locomotion. Then unguligrade means that the weight of the body is on the hooves, and the hooves are modified claws. And there's 2 groups of these. There's the artiodactyls. They have a cloven hoof with 2 digits, like deer, elk, caribou, giraffe. So think about a deer footprint that you see. It's got the 2 hooves, and so it's like 2 toes that are modified into a hoof. And then perissodactyls, they have just 1 digit that functions as a hoof, and that's horses and rhinoceros. So the cardiovascular system of mammals. You all know that mammals have a 4-chambered heart, so complete separation between the atria and the ventricles, and there's wide range in what the heart rate can be in different mammals. So an elephant, their heart rate might be as low as 25 beats per minute, whereas in shrews, they have crazy high metabolism. Their heart rate could be as high as 1,000 beats per minute, which is pretty astounding. Another thing about cardiovascular system that's unique in mammals is their red blood cells. First of all, the blood in general in mammals is made up of 3 different types of cells. Erythrocytes, those are red blood cells, leukocytes are white blood cells, and thrombocytes are the platelets. But the red blood cells are different from those in other vertebrates because they don't have a nucleus. When they're very first formed, they have a nucleus, but then they lose it, and it's so that there's more room for hemoglobin to carry oxygen, so it makes it more efficient. That's really their only job, is carrying oxygen, so why take up space with a nucleus and other organelles? Get rid of those and just carry lots and lots of oxygen. And it leaves them looking like a kind of concave disc, and it's concave on both sides, so call it biconcave. The respiratory system of mammals, you should know the path. So as air is inhaled either through the nose or the mouth, it travels through the pharynx, and that's kind of a shared space between the digestive and respiratory systems. Then it travels down the trachea, which is the windpipe, sometimes called. The epiglottis is that flap of skin that covers the windpipe when you swallow food, and that's to prevent choking. And then the trachea branches into 2 bronchi, singular, it's bronchus, and there's the right and the left, going to the right and the left lungs. And then inside the lungs, you can see on this diagram, each bronchi branches into bronchioles, which are smaller airways. And they just keep branching and branching until they get really tiny, and they end in these alveoli, which are these crazy little bunches of little sacs where oxygen and carbon dioxide are going to diffuse back and forth into the bloodstream, into these blood vessels that wrap all around them. So the alveoli kind of look like bunches of grapes, and the reason that they're just little round sacs is because that maximizes the surface area for the diffusion of the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Other thing in the respiratory system that's really unique to mammals is that diaphragm, the muscular diaphragm. So it's the muscle that separates the pleural cavities from the abdominal cavities, so you can see that on this diagram here. So it's a muscle that runs along the bottom of the lungs, and at rest it looks like a dome. You can kind of see that here, right? It's a little dome muscle there, but when it gets contracted, that's when you inhale, it flattens out, and as it flattens out, it kind of pulls down, and it creates a low pressure in the pleural cavities, and that actually sucks air into the lungs. And then when it relaxes again, the air gets pushed back out, or it flows back out. So the digestive system, again, you should know the general kind of path. So food comes in the oral cavity, goes down the esophagus, into the stomach, then the small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and out the anus. And you should know, in general, the differences between an herbivore's digestive tract, a carnivore's digestive tract, and specifically a ruminant's. So the different feeding strategies lead to different different structures in the digestive system. So ruminants, like deer, have this organ called the rumen. It's basically a fermentation chamber, and so if they eat plant matter with lots of cellulose in it, which, like our digestive systems, can't digest cellulose, that rumen is a fermentation chamber that allows it to be broken down with the help of things like bacteria and even protists. And you see how long an herbivore's digestive system is, right? And the cecum is another place that helps with digestive enzymes and with that fermentation. Super long digestive system in herbivores, whereas carnivores, it's much shorter because it's not as difficult to digest meat. In things like rabbits that are herbivores but not ruminants, they have a very long digestive tract, but that cecum is way bigger, and so that's what's helping them break down that plant matter. So the dentition in mammals is unique. Most mammals have diffidont teeth, which means we have two sets of them. We have baby teeth and then permanent teeth. And so the baby teeth are called milk teeth or deciduous teeth, meaning that they're going to fall out. Usually they're in at birth or soon after birth, but then they'll fall out and be replaced by those permanent adult teeth. Most mammals also have heterodont dentition, meaning they have different teeth for different functions. So we have incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Depending on the diet of the species, they might have just some of those. They might not have canine teeth, for instance. Like if they're herbivores, they might not have canine teeth. Rodents generally don't have canine teeth. Artiodactyla, things like deer, don't have canine teeth. Deer also lack their upper incisors because they just kind of shear grass with those bottom incisors and the bone on the top jaw. For herbivores that lack those canine teeth, you see this space. That space is called a diastema, so that's something to note. And then in carnivores, the carnassial teeth, or the carnassial pair, those are important teeth to note. Those are specially adapted to shear things like tendons and in some cases even bones, so they're super, super strong, adapted for slicing meat. The nervous system of mammals, the ears are way more developed than that of other vertebrates. The pinna is the external part, so the external part of the ear, and it funnels the sound into the ear canal. The ear canal is technically called the external auditory meatus, and that's how the sound is conveyed to the eardrum, or the tympanic membrane. There are 3 middle ear bones, and their function is to transmit vibrations from the eardrum to the inner ear. And so these 3 bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes, those are only found in mammals. And then the inner ear, the cochlea, this has tiny hair cells that can convert the mechanical energy of a sound into nerve impulses that are then transmitted to the brain, which is pretty cool. Echolocation is something that's used in some mammals. Bats, we've talked about that in class. Also shrews, whales, seals, and manatees can use echolocation. Some of them use it to locate food, sometimes to communicate, sometimes to move. Some species can use it for all those things. And then the eyes. The eyes are similar to other amniotes that we've talked about. So remember, amniotes are reptiles, birds, and mammals. Some mammals are colorblind. Whales and seals are an example. Lots of mammals have dichromatic vision. Dogs have that. Primates like us, we have trichromatic vision, meaning we can see blue, green, and red. And moles and rats actually have vestigial eyes, so they're so reduced that they barely even function anymore. The nose of mammals is highly developed for smelling, obviously, and most mammals have very large nasal passages, and this is especially strong in nocturnal animals. So if sight isn't something that they can use, usually they have very good senses of smell and hearing. So this is a good time to go back, look at your notes, make sure you have good notes about structure, function, and kind of the purpose or the adaptive advantage of the parts of the different systems: integumentary, skeletal, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, and nervous. Finally, a joke. What do you call an elephant that never washes? I bet you can get this one. It's a smelliphant. Alright, see you in class.